Child development is one of the hardest areas for us to cover in this class because there's so much information about child development. And we have people who have programs with infants only or infants and toddlers only. We have programs who have only school-age children. There's 12 years of development and a huge range of what's normal for them. So we're going to just hit on a few basics. Okay, the first one is that development starts at the top of your body and moves its way down. You have control of your eyes far earlier than you have control of your toes. It starts in the middle of your body and moves out to the side, which of course means that the first sense to fully develop is your sense of smell because it's towards the top of your body and it's in the middle. The last one to fully develop is your sense of touch. It starts with large muscles and moves to small. And then the last of the four basic rules of child development is a cognitive one as opposed to a motor skill one, which is that it starts with concrete and moves to abstract thought. The easiest place to see this is in children's understanding of what a baby is. In an infant or young toddler classroom, especially if you're looking at children who are under a year old, they don't play with all things that people think of as baby dolls. The ones that they will play with and use as if they were babies are ones that have dark ovals where eyes would be and a dark oval where the mouth would be, which is indented. There has to be a dent. And they have to have fingers and toes for the children to treat them like a baby, to try to give them a bottle or to hug them and pat them like they've been hugged and patted, or to rock them to sleep, those kinds of things that we would expect when somebody is playing baby. As the children so it has to have a very concrete reflection of what an infant looks like. It has to have fingers and toes. It has to have dark circles for eyes and an indented mouth where you could put that bottle, because their mouth is so much of a focus for them that the mouth is really very key. As we move on in age, the children get a little bit more able to extrapolate or to have things that don't look exactly like babies and still treat them like babies. With our toddlers, the first thing that happens with any baby doll is they all become naked. The children constantly steal their clothes, and that's fine. It's not a big deal. What they're trying to do is see, does it have a belly button? Does it have arms and legs that connect somewhere? They're just trying to see, is this really a baby? But frequently that center that has baby dolls will get overpopulated and there'll be more children who want to play with those things than we have items. So the children can go, if they don't have enough babies, they can go, okay, a puppy dog. Puppy, a stuffed dog, that's something else that you love and you take care of and you pet and you have to be careful of. I can hold the puppy dog or the teddy bear like it's a baby. I can do the same kinds of things with it. When we move a little bit older still, if there aren't enough dolls and people are playing mommy, daddy, baby, or family or whatever they're playing, and there's only 2 dolls and there's 3 people who want to hold dolls, they can just take a piece of fabric and wad it up and hold it and rock it in baby shape. Again, they have to be able to make it into a shape that's somewhat like a baby, but they don't actually have to have a baby. The 3s can do this with cloth. As they get older, I've seen kids use a block. Again, it's oblong shaped, so it's got a similar shape, but they just need some sort of representation. As they get even closer to that kindergarten age, they start to be able to just use air and just, do you like my baby? Isn't she pretty? And so they're moving into the abstract. They're still physically manipulating it as if it were there. So we're still somewhat concrete. We have to have something to physically touch, which is why the inventors of Webkinz were marketing geniuses or child development geniuses. They understood that children at that age, 4 to 6, need some concrete thing to relate to in order to feel like they can care for something. They have to have something to touch. So they have the Webkin, and then they punch in their little code on the internet, and then they play with the animated version of their Webkin. Because that is that whole, they aren't able to get to abstract yet. They still need something somewhat concrete to connect to that abstract little light that's moving around. And as they get older and older, they need less and less real connection. And then we get to the point where they're on Facebook and they have hundreds of friends who they've never seen, or at least 20 friends who they don't know. They know somebody who knows somebody who knows them. So if you've got an after-school program with those 10, 11, 12-year-olds, they probably have some sort of social media site that some of those kids are using. MySpace, Facebook, Twitter, whatever. They may have some sort of social media site where they're getting to know people who they don't really know. This used to be done through pen pals. It's the same thing. Facebook is pen pal for the 21st century. And kids at that elementary school age are feeling empowered and being able to have friends who they've never seen. They feel a little bit like spies, and that's fine. It's that progression from concrete, where I have to have a baby who has a mouth that has a dent, that has fingers and toes, to I have people who I call my friends, who I've never seen before, who could have 3 heads and be tattooed, and it doesn't matter. I don't know what they look like. I presume they have fingers because they're typing to me or they're writing me a pen pal letter. It's great. That's the transfer from concrete to abstract. The last area of child development is social. Their ability to relate to one another. Their ability to form connections, to form bonds with other people. Part of that for infants is the ability to recognize familiar faces. Part of it with school agers is that forming of cliques that we perhaps may not like, but it is part of their development. It is something that they're going to have to do. Specialized knowledge, those kinds of things. That's social relationships, social development. Their ability to take turns when they're 3, their ability to learn from what other children are doing so they don't have to fall themselves to learn that that's not a safe thing to do. These are all elements of social development, and that's another part of the child development mosaic. About child development, another huge deal is what is normal. A lot of parents are very concerned about, oh, little Mikey's not yet walking. He's so old. In the book, they say he should be walking by now. Well, Mikey's doing other things. That's not what Mikey's interested in doing. It just means that 50% of the people in that particular group are doing that particular thing. And in child development, it's even more complicated because there's those multiple different areas of development, and children could be normal in one area, gifted and talented in another, and have a special need in a third. So normal just means that half of the people in that group are doing that thing. So that means half of the people aren't doing that. It's okay a lot of the time. Because you only have so much energy. Each child only has so much energy. And if they are zooming ahead, if they're a year old and they have an expressive vocabulary of 200 words, the fact that they're not walking is not terribly surprising. Because they're spending so much time learning how to say more and milk and mama and dog and go They don't have time for this silly walking business. They have other things they need to get done. So the fact that the child's not walking, yes, that's not normal. But if, in order to say that the child has a problem, it needs to be affecting them negatively, or it needs to be in multiple different areas. So when we have parents who are concerned about normal, we need to look at, is it that they're just a little bit behind other children? Are they just not quite where other children would be at that same place? Or is it that they're spending so much of their mental energy on something else that they don't have time to deal with that issue that the parents are concerned about? On the flip side, sometimes we have children who obviously are outside the norm. We have 4-year-olds who are doing long division with remainders. This is a child who is outside the norm. This is a child who needs special attention. In this case, it's a child who's gifted and talented in a cognitive area. But that child needs a special element in their curriculum just as much as the child who is 2 years old and has not yet gotten the muscle tone to be able to walk. If you've got a 2-year-old who can't yet pull himself up and walk, then we have a child who has a significant delay and they need to receive services. But if we have a 4-year-old who can do long division with remainders, we also have a child who needs special services. Whether the child is special needs or gifted and talented, it is still a child who needs an individualized education plan. So I want you to think about that. Whether the child is gifted in one of the areas or they're behind in an area, they need a special plan. Let's talk about those different areas real quick, just to make sure everybody's speaking the same language, so to speak. Okay, the first one is gross motor skills. Gross motor skills are the ones that allow me to stand up. They're your large muscles like your thighs, your rear end, your big arm movements. These are gross motor skills. Swinging a bat is gross motor skill. Hitting the ball, that's more fine motor because that's the smaller muscles in your wrist. Holding a pencil, doing a puzzle. These are fine motor skill activities. Gross motor skill, walking, riding a bike, kicking a ball, throwing a ball. These are gross motor skill activities. Fine motor skills are things you're doing with the smaller muscles. Playing with a hacky sack, holding a pencil, calligraphy, picking up a Cheerio. These are all fine motor skill activities. Cognitive, this is stuff that's going on inside your head. Sometimes it's a little hard to tell how they're doing with cognitive, which is part of why we have checklists and things like that to look and see, are they learning how to pattern? Are they learning cause and effect? Those kinds of things. Can they remember what happened yesterday? Can they plan what they're going to do in 5 minutes? Can they follow a 3-part direction? Those kinds of things. So cognitive is thinking, the ability to think, to problem solve, to reason. The next one is verbal skills. This seems pretty straightforward. It's the ability to use language. But it's not just verbal language, it's also receptive language, their ability to understand what you say. And sometimes it is sign. Okay? If the child is saying, more crackers, please, but they're doing it all in sign, does that mean that they're behind in their verbal development? Well, not if they're 10 months old. If they're 10 months old, more crackers, please, whether you're saying it or signing it, is amazing. That's a child who's ahead in their verbal skills. Okay, so it's the ability to put thoughts into words, both receptively and expressively, whether with their hands or with their mouth. By their hands, I mean sign language, not shoving people. Okay. Self-help skills are another area of development. The ability to get what they need. Sometimes this, for an infant, self-help skills is having differentiated cries. That they have a cry that means, I am mad, and they have one that says, I got hurt. Okay? That is part of self-help skills for an infant. Rolling over is part of self-help skills for an infant, as it's also a gross motor skill. 4-year-olds, tattling is a self-help skill. I know it's not our favorite self-help skill, but it is a self-help skill because they want to know that they have power, that they have an ability to affect what is happening in their environment. Then we have the spiritual or self-concept. This is the one that there's the least documentation about. But it is one of the areas of development, and it's very important. It's how do they feel about where they fit into the wider universe. A lot of times people talk about this, about infants being incredibly self-centered. Everything's about them. And this is true really until the children are about 10 years old, that children have a hard time understanding that things that happen don't happen because of them. This is why divorce is so hard on young children. Because they think if I had done something different, that my parents wouldn't be getting a divorce. So that self-centeredness is part of that spiritual or self-concept. That whole, I'm with older 3s and young 4s, them drawing the same picture over and over and over and over and over again, the lollipop tree or the daisy or Thomas the Train, whatever it is, most kids have one picture that they draw over and over and over and over again, and that's part of their self-concept development because they're trying to find, what am I good at? This is the picture I'm good at drawing. I'm going to keep working on it to get better and better and better. So their ideas of what they're good at. Am I the pretty one? Am I the smart one? Am I the fast one? Am I the clever one? Those kinds of concepts are really an important part of the child's development. Am I competent or not? Can I do things? So the more that the teachers can allow the children to try things and fail and succeed, the better for the children's self-concept development. And there are critical periods in all of these different areas of development. The other thing I want to talk about with child development is having the talk with parents. When you think that a child is gifted and talented, or you think that a child has a special need, you need to talk to the parents. And this is one of the hardest conversations that you're ever going to have with a parent. But it's very important, because the earlier a child gets services, the better they're going to be able to function in life. So often there is a critical period for something and the child misses it because nobody recognizes that there's a problem, or nobody steps in and talks to the parent about the fact that there's a problem. And then you end up with a child who is gifted and talented, feeling frustrated and bored and acting out. Or you have a child who has a lisp for the rest of their life because nobody talked to the parent about it. Nobody offered services to the child until the child was 8 years old. And for the rest of their life, they're going to have to deal with their lisp, and it's going to be in the back of their mind. And they may be able to talk most of the time without the lisp. But if at 4 there had been some intervention and that they had been able to work with a speech therapist and show them where their tongue needs to be in their mouth to avoid that, then they won't have to think about this anymore. But if you don't work with a speech therapist until you're 10, you're going to have to work with that lisp for the rest of your life. And we all know people who are incredibly smart who weren't challenged early enough, and so they just never live up to their potential. You have to have this conversation with the parents. It's not fun. Either way, people have an idea of what their children are going to be, and when it's outside of that, it's hard for them. Okay, and sometimes we have to talk to them because they think their child has a special need or their child is gifted and talented and you don't see evidence of it. So let's talk about how we have that conversation. We'll first talk about the conversation when we think that a child has a special need. If the child is under 3, you want to talk about early childhood intervention services. If you don't have their number already, it is in your textbook. You can call the 1-800 number and they will help you find your local early childhood intervention provider. It's a national program funded by the federal government and our tax dollars, so nobody should feel bad about using it because it's funded by tax dollars. It's available to everyone in the country. Children under the age of 3 who have a special need can be evaluated by therapists from early childhood intervention services to find out if the child is just a little bit off, they're perfectly normal, or if there's a significant delay. And if there's a significant delay or something that's really affecting the child, then they will help the family by providing services for free, whether that's play therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy, cognitive therapy, whatever. There's lots of different opportunities, lots of different options of what they can do for that family and provide services either at your center or at the parent's home where they want it provided and at the schedule that they want. So my suggestion is to say something along these lines. We've been doing our evaluation of all the kids in your class, in your child's class, and these 3 things are: he's doing really well in this and that and the other thing. The speech is not quite where we would expect it, so I just want to go ahead and have someone else come in and do an evaluation to rule out that there's any problem. A lot of times these things are just, something that we missed, or sometimes there's something that we missed. They'll come in and do it for free, and it's just to rule out that there's any problem. Frequently, that's all that you'll have to say. Other times they'll say, well, what if there is a problem? Or, oh, I've seen that and I'm really concerned too. Thank you for talking to me about it. I wasn't sure what to do. Then you say, well, they'll come out and they'll do an evaluation. And if there is a problem, then they'll help your family and provide free services to you to help your child deal with the issue. And a lot of times they can help the child be able to function perfectly normally with their hearing loss, for instance. And that way the parents know it's not going to cost them anything. You're going to do all the legwork and they're going to get services for their child. Now, if the child is already 3, things are a little bit different. Because children over the age of 3 are supposed to get special needs services from the school district. However, the school district doesn't have to provide those services unless the child has a diagnosed special need. So you may have to go through the child's pediatrician. The conversation can be pretty similar, but you'll probably need to say something along the lines of, I'd really like to send a note to your doctor about what we're seeing so that he can follow up and see if he thinks what is happening is in the normal range, or if it's something that we need to work on more here at the program. And that way, the doctor who's going to have to make the diagnosis, and the doctor will have more than the 5 minutes maybe that they usually spend with that child. They'll read your letter about the observations. Please go over the observation section in the book before you do this and write a true formal observation of the child. Send it on to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician can then evaluate. And if there is a special need, then they will do the diagnosis and you can refer the child to the school district. Otherwise, it may be 1st or 2nd grade before the child's special need is addressed by the school district, just because of the systems at the school district. They want to do what's right. They want to help all the kids succeed, but they have a lot of hoops that they have to jump through. So if you already have the diagnosis from the pediatrician, it's a lot easier for that child to get the help that they need. Okay, what if the issue is that you have a child who is gifted and talented? You need to tell the parent, and you just need to say, wow, I'm really noticing that Michael is having a lot of his time that he is spending in the Block Center. And what we're noticing is that he's building these very elaborate things, and this is wonderful. And so what we're going to do is we're going to help him by having Legos and having pictures of different types of buildings, and we're going to do these other things in the other centers. I really think your child has great cognitive abilities in the spatial relations area. But most of the time when there's a child who has an area where they're gifted, there's also a reciprocal area where they are functioning at a lower level. So when you find the gifted area, also mention to the parents that because they're spending so much of their mental energy on the spatial relations, then they're not having as much time to spend on social skills. So, or on verbal skills, or whatever the area is. So when you're telling the parent about the area where the child is doing amazingly well, please also tell them about this area where the child's not spending as much energy, because a lot of times parents get focused on one or the other, and they need to really keep in mind both of them.